This video is sponsored by the Class Cheat Sheets for Revised 5e. Over the past few years, I've made a ton of videos in my series about the many ways to build a D&D character, and for a while I was really focusing on the different steps of the official character creation process, and seeing what it would look like if you use them as the foundation for your entire character. What does it look like if you start with your class, or your ancestry, or your background, or your alignment, or a feat, and so on. And there's one more feature of 5th edition's character creation process that I've always loved, but haven't used yet, and that's the random trinkets. I love the chart of random trinkets in 2014 D&D. It's just this bizarre list of weird stuff, and when you create your character, you can roll once on the chart and find out what weird random trinket you might have. For example, if you roll an 8, your character might have a small idol depicting a nightmarish creature that gives you unsettling dreams when you sleep near it. 25 would give you a silver icon of a raven. 77 is a sheet of parchment upon which is drawn a mechanical contraption. 84 is a receipt of deposit at a bank in a far-off city, and so on. So, some of these ask some really interesting questions like, wow, where'd you get this? And what does it mean to you? And others are actual plot hooks like, well, okay, what's in the bank vault? What is on this schematic? What monster or eldritch force does this idol depict? The goal of this chart seems to be to give your character some weird bonus detail to add some color to your character and flesh them out a bit more. For example, when we created our characters for Friday Night Quests way back in our original Session 0, our human noble fighter rolled and got a vial of dragon blood. He decided this was actually a sample of blood that all the princes and princesses carried, and that it came from his stepmother, who was a silver dragon. And that was a huge detail that wound up mattering a lot during the campaign overall. Meanwhile, my character was a sketchy con man, so when I got the result, a small box filled with different sized buttons, I figured that was just some weird habit he'd picked up. Like, he grew up on the streets wearing the same clothes all the time, so he just needed to replace the buttons a lot, because they would just get worn out. So he tended to collect buttons, and he stole them whenever he had the chance to. Now, it took me a couple of sessions to bring that backstory together with that item and sort of figure out how they worked together, but once I did, I realized why that item actually did make so much sense for that character. However, I've seen so many players sit down to play their character for the first time, and they get their random item, and they just cannot figure out why their character would have this. This is especially true if you have a very clear idea about your character's backstory and what drove them to go adventuring. If you're playing a naive farm boy who is out in the big city for the first time, and you've already figured out why you left home to go on adventures, then when you roll in the trinket chart and you get a silver bell without a clapper, it's not uncommon for a player to short-circuit when they see that. Like, that just sounds like literal trash. Why do I have that? Now, I can probably imagine how you can make that work, like maybe you just have it for sentimental reasons, whatever. But what about a mummified goblin hand, a pipe that blows bubbles, a lock of someone's hair? That's kind of telling you a lot about your character that you may not be okay with. But I wonder if maybe the problem is that in the 2014 Player's Handbook, this chart comes at the very end of the equipment section, so you've already pretty much figured out your entire character by the time you get to that chart. You know their class, their ancestry, their background, their proficiencies, their languages, their personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws, their weapons, their armor, their tools, how much gold they have. The character's done, and now you're just tossing in this really weird final item and you're trying to figure out how to make it work. Usually by that point, you've already figured out your backstory, so if you now suddenly discover that your character is carrying around a miniature cage with no door, well, for a lot of players that throws them for a loop. I was done making my character, and now I have to figure out how this fits into. Why? What does this add? Additionally, when you make your character in D&D Beyond, you're literally never presented with the option to roll for a trinket. So if you make all your characters through that method, which a lot of people do, following the steps for character creation through D&D Beyond, you literally never get asked to consider a trinket. And that means if your DM does ask you to roll for a trinket, it, again, throws you off, because you were literally done making your character. It was not even part of the formula you were using to build your character. Now in the 2024 Player's Handbook, we have the same chart, but instead of appearing at the end of the equipment chapter, it appears at the end of chapter 2, which explains all the steps for creating a character. It still appears last, after the discussion about choosing your class and your origin and your ability scores and your alignment and filling in details, and even after the advice about leveling up and starting at higher levels and multi-classing. It still very much reads as, oh, by the way, here's another cool thing you could do if you wanted. However, now the chart itself appears before the write-ups about each class. So technically, if you were just flipping through the book, you would find this chart before you find any other character options. And I think this new placement basically primes you to consider that you might want to fold a random trinket into your character, so you should start preparing yourself for that. Don't get too locked into who your character is. Leave a little room for a random trinket to come in at the end and change their personality a bit. But I might actually go a step further today. See, As I think I've established, the reason why so many new players struggle to figure out how to integrate a trinket into their character is because they weren't thinking about a trinket at any point during the character creation process. So it stands to reason that the earlier you roll your trinket, the easier it'll be to figure out how they got that trinket and use it to flesh out your backstory. So what if you started with the trinket? What if you figured out the trinket before you figured out your backstory, or your background, or even your class or your ancestry? What if we use the trinket as the starting point for the entire character? Now, in some ways, this is the opposite of the intended design of the trinket table. The goal of the trinket table is to give you something random and figure out how your existing character got their hands on it. But if the biggest problem with trinkets is trying to figure out how to integrate them into an existing character, well, what if we take that out of the equation and we just let the trinket do the work? So let's cut over to my kitchen where I'm going to make a character starting with a trinket. Also, just keep your eyes peeled for any sort of wacky, disruptive character to pop up in this video. In the last few videos I've made, some sort of cartoon witch or stock image angel has shown up and messed with me. Apparently we're doing a Monster of the Week format this year. So, just don't be surprised if you see some sort of colorful cartoon character show up at some point during this video when we least expect it. All right, let's go make a character. All right, I've got my character sheet, I've got my dice, I've got my player's handbook. We are going to go ahead and roll the percentile dice, and we're going to find out what trinket I'm going to be using to create this character. Let's do it. All right, that is 85, and that gives us a diary with 7 missing pages. Okay, let's put that on the character sheet. Diary with 7 missing pages. Now, my first impulse is to borrow a little bit from Indiana Jones. Hopefully he won't mind and won't feel that it belongs in a museum. But seriously, in Indiana Jones 3, he gets this diary in the mail from his father, who sent him this diary that had all the information that he'd ever been compiling in his entire life about his main interest, which was the Holy Grail. And Indiana Jones has to take that diary, figure out what happened to his father, and follow the trails and the clues and the riddles in the diary, and follow the trail to the Grail before the bad guys get to it. That's a way we could go. The other option that I'm thinking about is something like Treasure Island. Really, I'm thinking about Treasure Planet, which is the idea that the diary is not from a loved one, not somebody that the character knows very well or at all, that they just get their hands on this diary and it leads to some sort of treasure. And I guess you could mix those, right? I guess you have something like Gravity Falls, where as far as Dipper is aware, he doesn't know who the author of the journal is, but he's still trying to follow these clues that lead to this overriding mystery. But one of the big mysteries is who wrote the journals, which with something like Treasure Island, or Treasure Planet at the very least, who designed the map, who's got the treasure, all that stuff is not a mystery at all. It's just people who are long deceased. So this is basically the big question. Is this diary written by someone who the main character knows, and what happened to that person? Or is this a diary that the character found, and they're just investigating it that way? And I think you could go either way. I personally am leaning more towards it's somebody that the main character knows, and that they want to basically track down what happened to this person, as well as whatever mysteries it's pointing towards. Because I think that's a more fertile story engine and more fertile ground for the dungeon master to actually do something with. You know, we're thinking about something like Indiana Jones, obviously, where spoilers for a very good movie that came out, more than 30 years ago. But he does find his father pretty quickly, and then they're just on this mission together. But on the other hand, you have something like Supernatural, where they also get this diary that has all the information about all the monsters inside, very much like Gravity Falls, but in this case it is written by their father, like Indiana Jones. It's kind of a middle ground of those two scenarios, but when they actually try to track down their father, they can't do that using the diary, which they thought they'd be able to in the pilot. I just talked about that in a recent video. So what they instead have to do is they have to just go on these other adventures and then trust that their dungeon master is going to put other opportunities in front of them to find their missing friend, or loved one, in this case. So I kind of do like the idea that this is a diary written by somebody who this character knows, and this is not just a diary that they found. And part of the reason I like that so much is because it frees me up a little bit. Because if this is just a diary that was discovered in like a library or something, then I'm probably going to play a very bookish character, and that's really what I want to do. I want to play somebody who found this in a library and is searching through the information for it, and then they're going off on this mission, and also, by the way, they're probably a wizard, because I just like to play wizards. And I don't want to just go that way automatically. I want to see if this can lead to a different character. And so I think I like the idea that they got this diary from someone they love. I mean, I guess that could happen with any character, right? Any character could just get this from someone they love, even a wizard. But I do like the idea of maybe not playing a wizard this time, even though that's all I want to do. So I think this was written by a loved one, and I think part of the reason I feel so strongly about that as well is the missing pages. The thing that I like about the missing pages is we don't know who tore them out, but if it was a diary written by someone the main character knows, or not main character, that's kind of the problem with this idea, which remind me to talk about in just a second. By leaving it in the comments, I guess. I don't know what I meant by that. My point is, if this is a diary written by somebody that this character knows, then someone recently tore out those pages, right? If we're looking at an example like Indiana Jones, when he gets this diary, if the pages had been torn out, that would have happened within the last week, maybe month. I think we're in a similar situation here, and what that says is that there are people out there that are either they tore the pages out, or the author or whoever delivered the diary didn't want somebody else to get their hands on those pages, and that kind of introduces a bit of tension and a little bit of a ticking clock, and I think that's really interesting. Now, this does bring up the concern that I had a second ago, which is this could very easily become someone who has a very main character focus. But I'm going to just trust that if this is one of my characters, he is somebody who is going to allow other characters to sort of sometimes take the lead in whatever adventure they're going on, because I know that that's something I'm pretty good at. But the reason that this person's searching out whatever's going on, like they're going to have to come back to this every once in a while, because he's going to be sort of looking for his friend as well as trying to figure out whatever mystery happened. And I think the only reason they may not be doing one of those things in any given session is because they just don't have enough information, and he'll be doing some research. This is interesting. Now, if I'm a dungeon master and I'm sitting there at session 0 and I'm listening to my player come up with this nugget of a character idea, I'm definitely going to foster it. The comparison I'm hearing so far to things like the Grail Diary, the Journal in Gravity Falls, and the Winchester Notebook, all these are full of cryptic clues about monsters and magic and riddles about upcoming traps. This would be a very fun way to put more adventures in front of your players. I mean, go figure, this player, who is me, came up with this idea for a character that me as a dungeon master also thinks would be neat. No one should be particularly surprised by that. But I think this is also a flexible enough story engine that you can use it to tie into other quests that the other characters are also interested in. In fact, in my current campaign, I gave my players a journal written by the Judge, a legendary wizard in the ancient history of my world, and occasionally they're able to reference it and look things up and learn a little bit more about a certain dungeon or a certain monster. But it's also all written in code, so there's still that idea that you can't just page through this thing looking for every answer you might need for your campaign. So yeah, if my player came to me and said, I want a diary full of secrets that's going to lead me to solve some big mystery, I would probably start pouring through Indiana Jones and Gravity Falls and start looking at anything that had some sort of series of clues and riddles and information and start taking ideas from those. But also, as player Mike mentioned, you want to make sure that whoever has this diary isn't just driving the story forward towards the only task they have in front of them, the only thing that they as a player care about, which is solving the mystery. And this actually reminds me a little bit of the Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man movies. I have pretty mixed feelings about those films. Fantastic casts. The scripts are frustrating because sometimes they're brilliant and sometimes they're not. And one of the biggest issues I have with those movies is the way Peter is so focused on trying to solve the mystery of what happened to his father. But I actually think if I'm a dungeon master and my player is talking about a journal that they have and a mystery they're trying to solve, I think I would want to look at those movies and see the good and bad ways they handled that mystery. The inciting incident of the first film is that Peter finds this briefcase of his father's, he finds some files inside, he finds the picture of another scientist, it leads him to go meet Dr. Kurt Connors, that's where he gets the spider bite, he starts working with Connors and helping him with his research, that leads to the creation of the lizard. So even though we don't get the payoff in this movie for what happened to his father and what he was doing with his research, you can still see how following this trail led to a different plot point that was still somewhat related to Peter's quest to learn about his father, but was also still very much its own adventure with its own villain and its own stakes that the other characters could also care about and try to fight and stop. You can use a journal like this to steer the player towards all sorts of different adventures, because even if following one particular clue winds up leading to a dead end in terms of the larger mystery, that does not mean that that's where this adventure has to stop. It can open the door to another adventure. And there can be some interesting tension there, as the player character with the diary wants to keep following the other clues and trying to find their lost loved one and solve this mystery, but they still find themselves in the middle of a situation they can't ignore because they followed a clue that led to, like, a town in need of help. And now the player has to decide whether he's going to try to push the party to abandon these people to their fates, or whether they're going to focus on this new adventure and then follow another clue later on. The balancing act is you also want to make sure that you're rewarding the player with some relevant information. You can't just keep stringing them along with an endless mystery that doesn't advance in any way. And we'll talk about this some more in future videos, because there are some TV shows that have used an ongoing mystery in the background, and some of them have handled it really well, and others, I think others just don't give the characters enough breadcrumbs for the audience to really feel like they're making any progress. But like I said, considering that I spend a lot of time thinking about ongoing mysteries and story engines, this is a pretty good one. I would be very excited if a player came with this concept to the table. But that being said, I guess I should probably talk about The Amazing Spider-Man 2, because I think that's kind of the best example of the worst case scenario, what we don't want to have happen. In that movie, Peter is obsessed with solving this mystery, but the mystery doesn't really have that much to do with the rest of the movie. It's just this pretty unrelated subplot. There's a lot of those in that movie. It's a very messy movie. And yet Peter becomes fixated on this, despite the fact that it doesn't have anything to do with most of the rest of what he's got going on. It doesn't have anything to do with Electro, either in Electro's origin, or making Peter care about that problem, or offering a solution to that problem. It's tangentially related to Harry's sickness, but not really in a way that actually advances the story meaningfully. And yet Peter is obsessed with solving this mystery, and then he eventually follows these breadcrumb trails to go to this mysterious secret subway station. He watches this recording of his father. He finds out that the spider bite was basically destiny and nobody else could have gotten his powers that way, and then that's it. That's the payoff. That's all we get out of that subplot. It sucks because I'm a total sucker for a tape things to the wall montage. There's a pretty good one in this movie, and it does lead to a really incredible scene with Aunt May. But other than that, it doesn't really have that much to do with the rest of the story. And that's absolutely something I would be trying to avoid. If a player brought this character to my table, that would be the major pitfall I would not want the campaign to fall into. And one of the major differences is the fact that I can make sure there are these bad guys who are hunting down information about this journal, just like in Indiana Jones. And in Gravity Falls, come to think of it. And those villains can also be involved with the other players in some way, or they can just be so obviously villainous that the other players also want to deal with them. I'm not saying they have to be as bad as the Nazis from Indiana Jones, because, you know, obviously that gives people a lot of incentive to solve a mystery before the Nazis do, but like, Gravity Falls has Gideon, he's nowhere near as bad as a Nazi, and yet we still know it would be very bad news if he got his hands on the journals. So, the fact that other people are also pursuing this research is another way you can prevent this character from being the main character, by making sure their plot is relevant to everybody in the group. Again, we want to do this in a way that will not fall into the same pitfalls as the mysterious bad guys in the Amazing Spider-Man movies, but that's such a bigger subject, we do not have time to get into that today. I'll talk about that some other time, I promise. Of course, if I'm sitting there at Session 0 as my player makes their character, I'm not going to verbalize any of this. I'm keeping all of this to myself, and I'm just watching as they figure out the details for their character, and I'm starting to think about what I could do with the campaign down the road. So, I'll shut up. Let's cut back to the table. Let's see the character creation process continue. Now, I don't really have an idea for a class, but I kind of think a background can help to give us an idea for how this character got the journal. And any of these backgrounds could get the journal in any number of ways, right? An acolyte could receive it from another cleric or a priest. An artisan could get it in exchange for payment if someone couldn't pay another way. A charlatan could get it as part of a con. That's what they wound up getting in sort of a bet, like in The Road to El Dorado. That's a fun idea as well. The criminal could just steal it. It's the only thing they got from their haul, and they think it's a lost cause until they actually read it and see that it's pretty compelling. That's kind of the plot of the first Ant-Man movie. But all of those work if the journal is just something that they find and are interested in. And I still like the idea of this being something that they are emotionally invested in. So if we look at the rest of these, and you know what, actually, I want to look at Sailor, because even though I'm thinking about Jim Hawkins, even though he's not a sailor, you know, I'm still thinking about that idea of the sailor coming into town and providing the journal. Either it's something they found on their journeys or they're delivering it, and I just want to see what the sailor looks like, because I that's kind of where I started, is sort of with that comparison. I want to kind of play it out. Okay, so now you get feats as part of your background. You get the Tavern Brawler feats. I don't know what that does. Tavern Brawler. Enhanced Unarmed Strike. Unarmed Strike. When you hit with your unarmed strike and deal damage, you can deal bludgeoning damage equal to 1d4 plus your strength modifier instead of the normal damage of an unarmed strike. Damage rerolls. Whenever you roll a damage die for your unarmed strike, you can reroll the damage if it rolls a 1, and you must use the new roll. Okay. That would be really good if I was playing a monk. And this could be a monk. I have no problem with that necessarily. But I think I'm not feeling a monk for this character, and I think partially it's actually the idea that if this is a journal sent by someone who's, trying to get you to solve the mystery, and there's someone else who's also looking for this journal and trying to solve the same mystery. Again, if we're sort of planting some sort of riddles in this journal that the bad guys are after and the good guys are after, or at least this character is after, as one of the different causes that the player characters are looking for, the monk is kind of a logical person, right? It is someone you would send this to because you know that they'd be interested in researching it. Again, depending on your version of the monk, but the way I picture monks, I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but I think like a monk makes the most sense for the sailor background, and I have an idea for a sailor monk. Definitely, I've wanted to play one before, and maybe I'll deploy it at some point in this channel in the future, but I don't think it's the right fit for this character because it feels like the more obvious choice of who you would send it to, if that makes sense. I want someone a little bit more unconventional, because if I wanted a conventional option, I just would have played the wizard that I originally had the idea for, right? You would send this journal to a wizard if you wanted them to solve the mystery at the heart of it, because that's what they do. I think monk is kind of in the same category for me, even though they've done some work to sort of decouple the monk from some of that stuff, some of the idea of the sort of researcher aspect of things. I still feel like it's present in the class a little bit, or at least it is in my mind. I'll maybe have to dig into that another day. But for right now, what does the soldier get? Savage attacker. You've trained to deal particularly damaging strikes. Once per turn, when you hit a target with a weapon, you can roll the weapon's damage dice twice and use either roll against the target. That's really good. You get advantage on your damage. That's really good. That's a great feat. And the soldier, again, I like the idea that this could be someone who is, coming home, they're on leave or discharged. Actually, I have an idea for a character that might work for that. But either way, they're coming home, they're checking their mail, and they get this letter or this package, and they don't know how long ago it was, sent or received. It's just a diary that has 7 missing pages in it. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think partly, so I had an idea a long time ago for a soldier barbarian, and the idea was that this is somebody who was part of a, formal military. This was not a gladiator or a Viking or anything like that. They were a regimented soldier. But there was some ambush or something where the troop was caught unprepared, and this character rushed out into battle, and they didn't have any of their natural armor, or not natural, they didn't have any of their armor or their equipment or anything, and they kind of went into this rage frenzy, and they kind of discovered that they were a much more capable, confident, powerful fighter in battle without all of their armor. And I like that idea. I think part of the reason that I like that for this character is because that is somebody that you could send the diary to and people wouldn't necessarily expect them to have it. So they wouldn't be the first stop for the bad guys. The GM has the opportunity to deploy any bad guys they might want to look for the diary. I don't know who would be after it. I don't know what the diary is about. That's something that I would need to talk to the GM about. I need to say, what are some secrets or mysteries in your world that this diary could be connected to? Because I want to tie it into the world a little bit more. But absent of that, we can still do a little bit of work and figure out some things. I can't figure out who the bad guys are necessarily, but I could trust that the GM can give me that information or just deploy it in the game. That's not something I need to know. I do need to know a mystery about the world that the diary is hinting towards, and I can't do that since I don't have a setting, but at the very least, I can work with what I have so far. So this is somebody who came home from whatever mission they were on, and they found this package, and now they're investigating it a little bit more. They're looking into the author, who I need to figure out who wrote this diary, but I think it is probably somebody that they know, and they're going to try to go find them. Yeah, so first of all, we're going to write down that this is a soldier. And then I think I do like that barbarian idea, so I think we're going to write that down too. This is our class, the barbarian. Right, this is somebody who basically discovered in the thick of combat that they are a much more capable fighter when they don't fit into the neatly regimented role that they had in the army. I don't know necessarily how they feel about that. That's maybe something that we'll talk about a little bit more as we fill up this character a little bit more. But they were basically conditioned to be a part of this army, this fighting force, and now they have broken from that. and they're operating alone now, but that's not something they're necessarily comfortable with. Or maybe they are. We'll have to talk about that when we get into like their backstory and their background and stuff like that. But that can give us a way to help explain why he's a part of a adventuring party, which is he's used to being part of a team. So yeah, I think Barbarian makes a lot of sense. And actually, this is really interesting. I have here a little sheet that has all the information that a Barbarian can do on their turn. So it has everything you need to know about rage, armored defense, weapon mastery, danger sense, reckless attack, all the different things you get at higher levels. You can track your rage on here. On the other side, there's the things you can do on your turn, your movements, your action, your bonus action, all the options you have with those. There's some really cool art on here that shows a Barbarian in action. This is a fantastic item, and I think it's probably on Kickstarter right now. Why don't we pop over to the ad corner for some more information about that? That's right, this video is sponsored by the Kickstarter for the class cheat sheets for Revised 5e. This is a pack of 12 digital print-at-home, form-fillable reference sheets for each class in the new 2024 core rulebook. They're designed so you can learn your class faster and cut down on the amount of time you spend looking up rules at the table. Whether you're new to the game or a longtime player, it's still really easy to get things wrong, especially as we get used to playing a new edition that is very similar to the previous edition, but just different enough that we might still get some things wrong. I'm definitely going to get these packs for my own games and hand them out to my own players in my games because it's going to be a huge help for them to get a handle on their characters in a way that they just have not been able to manage thus far. Cheat sheets like this are exactly what they need. These sheets also offer a handy way to keep track of limited use abilities like Rage, and they use natural language and straightforward icons to make sure a new player easily understands what they can do on their turn. And each sheet also comes with stunning art. This project is run by Anto from Icarus Games, a fellow YouTuber and game designer who made similar sheets for 2014 D&D, and they were downloaded over 10,000 times. Because as much as we all might love this game, we also know that the folks who design it are not always great at onboarding new players. These forms really step up and provide something so many players need. A tool that cuts down on the uncertainty players feel about their abilities, and helps taking your turn feel less stressful and more rewarding. This campaign closes on March 12th, we're approaching the final week, so make sure you get your pledges in now. So sign up using my referral link in the description, and make sure to get your class cheat sheets. Thank you so much to Anto from Icarus Games for sponsoring this video. Wow, we've made it through this video so far with no other goofy characters popping up and derailing things. That's really good news. Let's see if we can get through the whole video without some villain popping up and ruining my day. Let's go back to the character creation process and keep building this character. Okay, so we need to know what species this character is going to be. Now, I always had the idea that this was a dwarf, but I haven't actually tried to make this character in 5.5 yet. So let me actually look at what you get for the different ancestries, because I don't want to go too crazy off the beaten path. Like, I don't necessarily want to do an ASMR. Again, part of this is the limitations of I don't know much about the world that this character would be playing in, so I don't know who has armies. But usually, dwarf is a good bet. Dragonborn, maybe. Humans, you know you would have. Elves, maybe. It depends on the setting. But gnomes probably wouldn't. As much as I love the idea of a gnome barbarian, and I played them before and they were a lot of fun, or halfling barbarians. Goliath, like Goliath's interesting, but again, I don't know what their culture is in this individual world, so I don't know. And then orcs, yeah, same with tieflings. Like, are they a member of a multicultural community and everyone is part of the army, or is it more separated, more regimented? So I think what, at least without knowing what setting this is taking place in, I'm going to start with one of the ancestries that makes the most sense, whether or not people are segmented into their own armies or if they're integrated with each other, and that's either the human or the dwarf. Let's look at what they actually get. Dwarves, they get resistance to poison damage, advantage on saving throws against poison, dwarven toughness, your hit point maximum increases by 1, and it increases by 1 again whenever you gain a level, and stone cunning, which gives you tremor sense as a bonus action. But the human, the human gets a feat now, right? Like, they're all variant humans from 2014 D&D, so they all get a feat. You gain the heroic inspiration whenever you finish a long rest. I need to talk to the players in one of my games and make sure they know that. Actually, both of my games have humans who are not taking advantage of this. Skillful, gain proficiency in one of your skills of your choice. Versatile, gain an origin feat of your choice. Okay, so the origin feats, let's take a look at those. Because you could just take the tough feat, and basically you'd get the same benefits of playing a dwarf, but through being a human. And your hit point maximum increases by an amount equal to twice your character level when you gain this feat. When you gain a character level there afterwards, your hit point maximum increases by an additional 2 hit points. So it's even better than the dwarf. And you also still get the heroic inspiration. So the human is better. So I think we're going to go human, but which feat are we actually necessarily going to take? Because it doesn't have to be the tough feat. Because there you can also take the alert feat. I did just talk about how much I like the alert feat a lot. I just talked about that in a video just the other day. Or week or something. I don't know. When does time happen? But there's also the Savage Attacker, where you roll the weapons damage dice. Oh, we already get that, which I just talked about that. That's what I get as part of being a soldier. Skilled is what they recommend, which I'm not interested in. That's just more proficiencies. Lucky? Lucky's good. I'm actually leaning towards alert, and I think the reason why... I like tough. We can always come back for tough another time. Maybe not, actually. I don't know how the feats work now. I don't know if you can't get the origin feats later on. But either way, not really the point, because I like the alert feat, partially because, again, it's a nod to their history as a soldier, right? They're not fighting like a soldier fights anymore, but what they are still doing is they are able to think strategically. They're not just going into a mindless rage. And this kind of comes into how I think about this character fighting in general, which is I don't think that they are a mindless maniac in battle. I think what they are more rough and intense in battle for sure. And you know what it is? I think they are... I think a little bit about Thor in the Marvel movies. You know, in the first movie, he is this wild, savage attacker when he goes into battle, but he's not very, composed in most of his life. In the second Thor movie, he's much more composed, much more deliberate, but he's able to still fight really well, but we don't really see him cut loose in battle quite as much after that. And the middle ground really is the first Avengers movie, actually, where you can see him still having some regrets about who he was and what he was doing with his life previously in the last film. And he is still a thoughtful character, but you also have that moment in the first Avengers movie when he's trying to calm Bruce Banner down. Like, he's trying to do the right thing, the sensible thing. But then he gets hit really hard, and he gets a smile on his face, like, oh, but actually, maybe I'm going to let this fight go a little longer because I could fight a worthy target. You kind of get the same thing with Iron Man, right? He tries to de-escalate that situation, but then he hears the insult from Iron Man, just like in the first Thor movie. He hears the insult, and he kind of just turns on a dime and goes after him. I do like that approach where he's not Wolverine, right? I think that's kind of the distinction I want to draw. I think Wolverine is the perfect example of a barbarian in D&D. I mean, really, obviously, we can look at things like Conan the Barbarian or any Jason Momoa character, but for me, it has always been Wolverine. If you say to someone that a barbarian is Wolverine or the Hulk, they get it. And I don't think that's who this character is. I think they go into this sort of fugue almost when they go into battle, is like how we imagine barbarians, and that's not what I picture with this character. Yes, he kind of unloads. He goes, he lets himself off the chain. You know what it is? It's Daredevil as well. Daredevil from the MCU, who's very smart, very intelligent, but when he's in battle, he's a very dangerous warrior, partially because of his intelligence and his strategy, and also partially because, as they say in the first episode, those Murdoch boys have the devil in them. There's this darkness, this sort of sinister nature to how he handles himself in battle that really upsets people. So I like the idea that this is not just a character who is a mindless warrior, right? Or a gladiator or something like that. This is someone who does think about tactics. Kind of gives you the opportunity to still think about that a little bit in the game. Like, we haven't rolled for his stats yet. Maybe he'll be smart, maybe he'll be stupid. He could be either one, right? All he's doing is investigating a mystery. You don't have to be smart to do that. You just have to be invested and interested in it. I think that's kind of what I want to do with this character, is make a character who's passionate about something and trying to solve a mystery and trying to solve these riddles or whatever's in the diary, which I have to figure out. But they don't have to have a high intelligence to do that. They just have to be invested in it. Likewise, you don't have to have a high intelligence to still think strategically in battle, right? This is something we talk about all the time on the channel with Grog. Grog from Critical Role is dumb. He has a very low intelligence score. But Travis does like to think about tactics. And sometimes I think people don't appreciate how he's justifying that and making it work. And from my perspective, you can make that work. That's not an incompatible idea. But I think with this character, you have a really good opportunity to basically have your cake and eat it too. Yes, in battle, he's this, dangerous, volatile, insane warrior, but he's not completely unreachable, especially at the very beginning of a fight, which is when the alert feat comes into play, because you can do the initiative swap at the beginning of combat, which is right after you roll initiative, you swap your initiative with the initiative of one willing ally of the same combat. You can't make the swap if you or the ally has the incapacitated condition. So, and he also has a bonus to his initiative based on his proficiency bonus. So he knows who should act first. And it's, first of all, very helpful for a barbarian in general, because a barbarian sometimes needs to get out in front of the rest of the party before the bad guys can approach. But also, maybe as a strategic fighter, he knows sometimes you need to hold back a little bit. And I think this kind of helps because anytime you're playing a soldier martial character, I think there's an impulse to go with the battle master, right? By the very definition of that subclass of fighter, you have this person who is very good at battle, and you want to find a way to kind of convey that in the game. And I don't think this character is that guy. But you can have a little flavor of it through using the alert feat. So even though, realistically, I should take the tough feat, I'm going to go with the alert feat. And I'm just going to hope that I get good stats. So let's write that down. Alert, proficiency on initiative, swap initiative. And I'm going to mark down this is on page 200, because it's really useful to know if I want to know exactly what this says. I can flip back to it. I would honestly probably rewrite this character sheet with a little bit more detail, but right now this is just the essentials. All right, let's go ahead and roll for stats. Speaking of essentials, I'm just going to roll. I'm going to roll for my stats. I don't know what we would do in an actual campaign. It would kind of depend on the party, but the thing I like about this character is he can have really good stats or really poor stats, and it all makes sense. Like I said, you don't have to be intelligent to be invested in a mystery. So let's go ahead and roll. Let me make a little room and write these down. All right. That's a really good roll. That is 15. It's another really good roll. That's a 17. Wow. It's almost as good as it could have been. 6, 6, and 5. Right. Okay. 12. Okay. 11. Okay, that is 14. And last roll. This is a pretty good spread so far. Oh no! Ooh, 6. Okay. Well, that's really interesting. Let's go ahead and place these. So, first of all, you get... Oh, that's the wrong box. 17... Actually, no, hold on. You get modifiers on these, right? I actually don't know how that works. So they're not part of your ancestry anymore, but they are part of your background. Strength, dexterity, and constitution. Okay, I don't know what that means. Hold on. Ability scores. A background lists 3 of your character's ability scores, increase 1 by 2 and another by 1, or increase all 3 by 1. Okay, so I could either get a +1 in strength, dexterity, or constitution, or I could do +2 in one, +1 in the other. Got it. Okay. Okay, if I put the 17 in strength, then I could do, or I could do an 18 in strength. I could give it a +1 or +2 and make it 19. There's no benefit to that though. Or what I could do is give the 15 a bump of 1 and make it a 16, and give the 14 the +2 and make that a 16, and those can be my dexterity and my constitution. Yeah, let's do that. So it's gonna be 17, 16, 16. Then let's put 12 in wisdom. I think that makes sense. 11 in intelligence. He's not stupid. He's just got very average intelligence. And 6 in charisma. So this maybe this is why he's not a battle master fighter. He's not really a leader of men. Okay, let's figure out our character's personality. And then we have these charts that are no longer part of the background, which I do not like. I liked it when they were there. But let's actually look at these charts and let's see what they give us. So we've got high strength, high dexterity, high constitution. We can just roll a d4 for each of those and see what we get. So for strength, for the d4, we got a 4. That gives us direct. Okay. That makes perfect sense. Our dexterity, we get another 4, and that is poised. For constitution, another 4, and that is stable. So again, I think this really matches with the character that I was describing, which is somebody who, you know, when they're in formal situations, they can be very stoic. They can still play the role, essentially, of being the good solid soldier who follows all the rules and obeys, but even though we know that when they're actually in battle, they're not that guy at all, which is why they're not part of the army anymore. Were they discharged? Are they just on leave? Did they just leave themselves? Did they go AWOL? I don't know. I'll have to figure that out. And now we have a very low charisma, so I think we are actually going to just roll for that stat as well. And we use the low roll, and we're not going to worry about intelligence or wisdom. All right, that is a 2. That is command. Oh no, I'm sorry. That's the high. That's the high charisma chart. For low, it is humorless. Okay, that's going to be a little tricky to play, especially for someone like me who likes to lean on humor at the table. But I can kind of lean into a different style of humor where he's sort of oblivious of how sort of stoic and rigid he is. And then let's look at the alignment. I don't really know what his alignment is. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to roll a d4, and I'm going to see what I get, and I'm just going to go through the lists and see which one seems interesting to me, and use that to help determine my alignment. This is not how they intend it, but so I'm going to try. That's a 3. Chaotic would give us rebellious. Yeah, maybe. Good would give us honest. Honest is fun. Honest is fun. It sort of matches with the humorless aspect. The direct as well. If he's direct and also honest, that makes a lot of sense. He can still be poised, but also still very direct and blunt and honest with people. That's really fun. And it kind of is another way to describe like honorable, right? A character who is honorable is also honest in a lot of ways. You want to make sure that he doesn't veer into lawful stupid territory, and I'm not too worried about that with this character. He's still got a lot going on. You know, basically, this is somebody who, we were making comparisons earlier, this really matches with the sort of Daredevil and Thor idea of someone who is more buttoned up, more composed, but not like Wolverine. You know, when Wolverine is even trying to be a part of noble, nice society, he is not able to do so. He has never been the character who is nice and chill and normal and cool, even when he's trying to be the good soldier or the honorable samurai, which he very rarely is. And if he's good, maybe he's also neutral, because I don't think he's chaotic good. I mean, maybe, I don't know. I think he's more neutral good than he is chaotic good. That is a 4 for pragmatic. Yeah, that tracks for me. You know, somebody who is played by Mike Christensen, and so that's going to be a pragmatic character. That's just how we roll. Stoic, direct, poised, humorless, goes into a battle rage. This is Drax. You're describing Drax. I mean, if you're worried about how to play this character, it's Drax. Sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead, keep going. Now, there's one more section that's not on the character sheet necessarily, but it is in this chapter. Imagine your past and present. Let your character's background and species inspire how you imagine their past. That past fed into the character's present. With that in mind, consider the answers to the following questions as your character. Who raised you? Who was your deepest childhood friend? Did you grow up with a pet? Have you fallen in love? If so, with whom? Did you join an organization such as a guild or religion? If so, are you still a member of it? What elements of your past inspire you to go on adventures now? Okay, who raised you? I think there's a mother, and I think she's still alive, and I think maybe he sends money home to her. And they're still cooking, and that means that is potentially a pressure point that the GM could play with. But that is at least a solid like home base that he could go back to, or potentially an NPC to get kidnapped or corrupted or something like that. Oh, don't worry. As the Dungeon Master, I am going to kidnap or threaten your character's mother. That's definitely going to happen. Who was your dearest childhood friend? I like the idea that this is sort of this could be the writer of the diary. You know, this person who went into more academia, went into research, but back when we were kids together, they were really close. Kind of reminds me of Reed Richards and Ben Grimm, because Ben and Reed were really, really close friends. Ben protected Reed, and that's basically what our character would be doing, which is protecting this other character, this sage, now in the present day, when they were kids. And that was a really nice, wholesome dynamic between the two of them, and now maybe they lost touch after a long time, and getting the diary from them is very weird, but that's also why they weren't on the bad guy's radar. No one thought that my character would have gotten the diary, so no one's checked with him yet. Did you grow up with a pet? No, I don't think so. I weirdly don't think he has the temperament for a pet, or at least, let me rephrase. I think if he had had a pet, it would have mellowed him out more than the character we have now. Have you fallen in love? If so, with whom? Okay, I'll have to come back to that. Did you join an organization such as a guild or religion? If so, are you still a member of it? Okay, again, I don't know the setting, so I don't know if there are any major factions in this world, but setting that aside for a minute, it would be nice. I mean, obviously he's a member of the military, so he's a member of that, but I'm kind of thinking about the connection with the childhood friend. Maybe the two of them had like a junior adventurers guild that they formed, like in Up, where the two main characters, or, you know, the Carl and Ellie, when they're kids, have this sort of junior adventurers club where they just go out in the backyard and hunt bugs and things like that. I think maybe that's what this character had with the Sage. In fact, if we continue the Up parallels a little bit more, it's possible that this is the answer to have you ever fallen in love? Maybe this guy and the Sage had a little bit of a romantic entanglement. Maybe it was unspoken, maybe nothing ever came of it, but maybe that's also why he's kind of like looking for his old friend to see if he's still okay and find him and see what's going on with him. Now, the thing, too, about the Junior Adventurers Guild in Up, whatever it was called, it was basically considered like an official offshoot of an actual existing organization, or at the very least, it was like their unofficial version of some like promotional material for their childhood hero. Which, again, I don't know the setting. If there is an organization like that would make sense for these characters to basically be so excited about and to want to basically consider themselves as junior members of. But if we sort of assume that something like that does exist or could exist, yeah, I think this guy and the Sage were junior adventurers together when they were kids. What elements of your past inspire you to go on adventures now? I think we just answered that. I think, you know, he is very motivated by trying to find his friend, but even outside of that, just trying to protect people. I think that's why he sort of went into his state when he was on the battlefield, which is that he was just trying to protect his friends and, you know, throw caution to the wind and didn't follow the observed protocols or anything like that. And he sort of scared everybody a little bit. But yeah, I think that makes the most sense for this character. And now he needs a name. And I think the name that I'm coming up with right now, the one that's going around in my head, is inspired by Jet in Cowboy Bebop, just because I've been watching a lot of that the past couple weeks. And in one of my favorite scenes in Cowboy Bebop, he describes himself as the Black Dog. It's a nickname that he had from his police days, because he says once he bites, he never lets go. And I think that kind of applies to this character, right? This is somebody who also has a former, job of serve and protect of sorts. You know, this was a soldier, Jet was a cop, but at the very least, it's similar. And also is like a dog with a bone, right? He is like determined to figure out what's going on with this diary and what riddles are inside and find his friend, even if he's not necessarily the best person to investigate that stuff, because that's not really his skill set. It's not his wheelhouse, but he's still invested and he's going to do it. But he's a barbarian, right? Jet is definitely not. Jet is a much more composed character. You know, if he's the Black Dog, maybe this character is Mad Dog. Like, that's his nickname. And the reason I thought of that is actually because that was my nickname in my 20s. For reasons that are not worth getting into, I got that nickname very ironically when I was in like high school or something. Only like 2 people called me that. But then when I was getting my first job, they were asking me like, oh, do you have any nicknames? And I was like, yeah. I mean, like a couple of people back home called me Mad Dog. And before I could finish saying that, one of the people was like, Mad Dog, that's perfect. We're going to call you Mad Dog. And it stuck around for like most of my 20s, I think. And even though it's obviously a very ironic name. But so that kind of is funny for that reason. But also, like, it does, I think, describe this character. Like, he is determined. He's got his scent of the person he's trying to track down, not literally, but figuratively. And he's also kind of a wild dog when he gets let off the leash, and that kind of works for me. Again, kind of like Jet Li in Unleashed a little bit, who's the mad dog in that movie. So yeah, and then for his last name, I think the name that's popped into my head, I don't know why, is Sorensen. And I think it's actually inspired by Cowboy Bebop very early in the show. I think in episode 1, there's a character with the last name Solenson or something like that. So it's not the exact same, but it's definitely a little bit of a nod to it. Mad Dog Sorensen. And try not to think about the fact that it sounds a little bit like Christensen, because that is a coincidence. Even as I start to write Christensen on my character sheet. Sorensen. And with that, we have a character. I would need to go in and fill in a couple of details, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. But obviously the big detail is trying to figure out what is in the diary, which I don't even know where to start. Whenever possible, when I'm making characters for this series, or if I'm just making characters for fun in my free time, I do try to make setting-agnostic characters or campaign-agnostic characters. Characters who could be literally just dropped into any game with no issue. But that's not really how I create characters in my home games. I want to know more about the setting of the game, so I can pick up details that I think are interesting and explore how they would inspire a character. Today we're not making a character for a specific setting. That's a whole other topic that we can talk about another time. But we have found a character concept that I think really does need more setting details before you can actually finish building the character. What are they looking for? What sort of secret about the world are they looking to uncover? Does the journal warn them about any particular dangers? As the game master, I would work with my player and give them that information, but until we know the world of the game, we can't really answer those questions today. So, what is the world of the game? What? Where does this game take place? What secrets are there that this character can explore? How can I tie this diary into the larger mythology of the world? Wait, you can hear me? Yeah, and I'm trying to create this character, but I can't finish doing that until you tell me a little bit more about this setting. I was just giving you an example. I'm not going to stand here and tell you all about a campaign setting. I wouldn't even know where to start. Well, you better figure it out, because I am almost done creating a really cool character, but I literally can't finish the character until I know a little bit more about the world, so I'm not going anywhere until you tell me something about this setting that I could actually use as the starting point for this trinket, for this diary that is going to send this character on his adventures. Oh my god. You're the monster of the week. I don't know what that means. I'm just a player, remember? It's not my job to worry about story structure or whatever else you've got going on, but I want an interesting plot hook, something that will satisfy my character creation needs. I'm not going anywhere until you give me one. So wait, I have to choose a setting, then come up with some interesting secrets that you might find compelling, and find a way to present them to you without also giving you the answers to those mysteries. Do I have that right? Yeah, and I'd like more than one option, please. I might not be satisfied with the secret that you give me, so you're gonna need to tell me a lot about your world. How the hell am I supposed to give you that much information about a campaign setting? Thanks for watching the video. I'm sorry that this was another long one. I didn't think it was going to be, and then it was. I feel like I've said that a lot this year. I think I'm going to keep saying it a lot more this year. But I really appreciate you being here. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment, and use the word fish or fishing somewhere in the comments so that I know you got all the way to the end of the video. It has nothing to do with anything else in the video. You might just say that I'm fishing for comments. And engagement of some sort. Other than that, I should have a Patreon live stream that's happening on Monday. This should be the day this video comes out, so make sure you pop over, check out that Patreon live stream, or it's also going to be on the YouTube channel membership. And if you missed it, don't worry, the VOD will be saved, so as long as you're a member of $3 a month or more, you will get to see that live stream. And I might be rethinking some of my Patreon tiers. I might be talking about that with the patrons a little bit over the next month or two, and we'll see what happens, and I'll definitely announce that soon, because I think I want to move some things around and make some rewards more accessible to more people. Other than that, not much else to say, so check out this video right here, whatever video that is, and watch that, and until next time, play fair, and have fun.